Looking back on his collaborations with Charlotte Moorman following her death in 1991, Namjoon Paik wrote, quote, "I bet there are still many new openings and loopholes in art history, even in 1992, which are being overlooked right now by millions of young people who complain that everything has already been done, so they cannot do new breakthroughs. However, the history of the world says that we don't win the games, but we change the rules of the games," end quote. 30 years later, it's worth thinking about the loopholes that Paik opened up for other artists to jump through, thereby changing the rules of the games of contemporary art. While certainly not comprehensive, today I will enumerate 5 enduring principles of Paik's, drawn from his writing and embodied by his art, that can act as potential pathways for today's artists. I will also reflect on recent works by artists that instantiate these principles and help further expand these loopholes by dint of their example. Opening 1, Media Compost. Curator David Ross described one of Paik's signature creative methods of self-recycling material as, quote, "a video compost with no old work ever discarded, and nearly every bit or routine resurfacing to give the viewer the comfortable feeling that this seemingly foreign material is somehow familiar," end quote. Paik's self-remixing can be distinguished from the cynical mining of intellectual property by mainstream media conglomerates by offering a means of self-examination, one that takes stock of the passage of time while burrowing into one's own process and output in order to discover new resonances in different contexts. We can see one particular example of this creative reuse that stretched over decades of Paik's art. This employment of one's own material that I've termed elsewhere the memix rather than the remix can be seen in a single-channel work from 1971, Ginsberg-Aldrich, which is partially a profile of poet Allen Ginsberg, who became a frequent collaborator of Paik's. A sequence of Ginsberg chanting from that tape reappears in Global Groove from 1973, and again in TV Garden, and then on through to Allen Ginsberg in 2005, in which Paik retrofit a vintage television with footage of Ginsberg from various projects, and finally in Chinese Memory, completed a year before Paik's death. These latter pieces carry an elegiac quality, operating at once as memento mori and electronic monuments to Paik's friend and fellow artist. Chinese Memory displays footage from Paik's earlier works, Global Groove, Suite 212, and You Can't Lick Stamps in China. The installation also includes a scroll and a stack of books. The books include Mao's Little Red Book, but also the Shiji, also known as the Records of the Grand Historian, which dates from 85 BCE. This history of ancient China, authored by Sima Qian, is considered to be a cornerstone of Chinese literature. The Shiji represents another kind of recycling for Paik, who rewrote proverbs and stories from that text and other ancient books in his Scrutable Chinese notebook as a means of exploring history and his own cultural roots. Paik knew that memories can be painful and can lead one down dark paths. In one story, titled Ecology of Forgetting, adapted from the Li Tse, a Taoist text from the 3rd century, he recounts the story of a middle-aged man whose memory is restored following a bout of amnesia. We might find echoes of this cycle of loss and recovery in Sabrina Rattay's Distributed Memories from 2022, which enacts a similarly cyclical journey through a painstaking assemblage of her past artistic labor. Distributed memory is a term from computer science, which refers to a multiprocessor system in which each processor has its own private memory. Made in collaboration with Guillaume Arsenault with a soundtrack by Roger Tellier-Craig, the piece mobilizes 1,500 digital studies, or previously private memories, made over 10 years by Rattay into an interactive installation of quote-unquote electronic and human memory, spread out over multiple flat screens, CRTs, and tablets hung across the gallery space and affixed to televisual totems with dangling wires. The installation features interactive buttons in their own futuristic housing that serve as aleatory remote controls, bringing new memories to the surface of the screens. Rattay's interactivity is not quite the kind of hands-on co-creativity present in Paik's Participation TV or TV Crown or any of the number of interactive pieces that we've seen throughout the day today. Those allow the users to create and control the art on display. Rattay's is more circumscribed, and the control given to the viewer is fleeting. While viewers can change the stream of memories, they cannot determine it, shape it, or give it meaning. Surrounded, even overwhelmed by the volume of Rattay's personal archive, the viewer is prompted to consider the impossibility of knowing another's mind, even when they share nearly everything with you. Rattay's compendium of liminal spaces are absent of recognizable human bodies, yet can be understood as a disembodied consciousness tunneling through corridors in the computer-generated warp and weft that she spent years developing, exploring, and threading together. These memories are fabricated rather than remembered and express a longing for a return to a past that envisioned a different future. As Paik once said, quote, "Once on videotape, you are not allowed to die," end quote. This remark has proved prescient, as memory in the digital age straddles private and public, with images being posted, distributed, and shared. We attempt to order and narrativize memory, but Rattay demonstrates the degree to which memory is nonlinear, multiple, overlapping, comes to us in flashes. Even when we turn that ordering over to storage and algorithmic function, we never have it in its totality. If not accessed, are those memories still there? What is a life if it is only an accumulation of memory? And what is life in the digital age but one endless mimix? Opening 2, wall-to-wall TV. Writing an exhibition catalog in 1971, Paik stated, "In TV as a creative medium and vision in television, the video transformation of self-portrait and self-feedback taught me about the mystics of electronic media and the possibility of changing the interior space of future architecture through wall-to-wall TV," end quote. Larger and more immersive screens have taken up real estate in interior spaces, including Paik's works ranging from massive video walls, such as Fin de Siècle from 1989, to projection pieces, which we've seen today, like Sistine Chapel, which achieves a technological sublimity through pop culture and Paik's own works rather than through divine imagery. But projection mapping has also granted artists opportunities to engage with the possibilities of changing exterior architectural sites as well. While varieties of projection mapping have been around for decades, most such projects use the building as a canvas to reconfigure the architecture or to act as a different kind of screen for expression. Alyssa Blount-Moorhead's As of a Now from 2018, on the other hand, utilizes projection mapping and augmented reality to peer into architecture and into history. For As of a Now, the artist combined AR with oral histories, transforming a vacant row house known as Abando, as in abandoned, in West Baltimore, where she's from, into a site of a different kind of quote-unquote urban renewal than one that favors gentrification, higher class housing, and business development. "My aim," says Moorhead, "is to privilege Black bodies and narratives by examining quotidian gestures." Moorhead has referenced Gordon Matta Clark's idea of ana-architecture, a portmanteau born out of 1970s New York urban desolation that combines the words anarchy and architecture, and which represented an upending of material and conceptual conventions around structure, including systemic racism and the housing inequities that it promulgates. Scholar Alessandra Rango refers to this as Moorhead's refusal to accept the building's vacancy, and her insistence instead on a, quote, autobiography of the ensemble, end quote, which deconstructs and reveals by virtually peeling back a brick surface to expose a family's 100 years of history. As of a Now is a work that utilizes the power of monumental projection, not for spectacle, but to establish true human-scale intimacy, focusing on the people and their stories rather than on the architectural surface and resale value or lack thereof. Moorhead demands that we gaze again at a part of the landscape that has been overlooked in favor of moving on, sweeping aside, and making a way for the new. Instead of preserving the house, Moorhead wants to preserve the lived experiences of the people who made it their home. If I could, she says, quote, I would bring those people to life and rip back the wall myself, end quote. Opening 3, Without Gravity. And I was delighted to hear Hannah also reference this quote. Great minds, Hannah. In Random Access Information, written in 1980, Paik suggested that portability and shareability would shape emergent art practices, looking back to, quote, art forms people could carry in their brain, end quote, like music and poetry, before stating, quote, in the future, the only artwork that will survive will have no gravity at all, end quote. In Paik's own art, as we've seen today, such as Fish Flies on the Sky or Modulation in Sync from 2000, they faint towards a kind of weightlessness, unbounded by conventions of traditional installation or viewing orientation. Lonneke Gorgin's and Ralph Nauda's work as Studio Drift seems to literalize Paik's prophecy, commanding a fleet of drones to perform acrobatic and geometrically precise real-time light spectacles in a variety of settings, from opera houses to space rocket launch pads. Drift develops custom software that allows them to manipulate luminosity and hue relationally, so that individual drones respond to and react to the other members of their aerial cohort, easily navigating both blue-chip galleries such as Pace and countercultural festivals such as Burning Man in Nevada's Black Rock Desert. Drift's art considers the role of individuality within group dynamics. Taking inspiration from the natural world, Drift's drone aeroballetics reference swarm patterns and the flight patterns of starlings. In these works that shift between representation and abstraction, figure and symbol, the sky becomes a screen, fulfilling Paik's vision for an artwork without gravity. Drones, which have revolutionized both photography and military force, and which are intended as nimble delivery mechanisms for Amazon.com, are potentially rich artistic media, repurposed by Drift as a kind of airborne pointillism. These drones provide uplift and wonder instead of surveillance and terror. And yet, as Drift makes clear, and as Paik knew well, even weightless transmissions require weighty infrastructure. In his 1974 essay, Media Planning for the Post-Industrial Society, he envisions a world wrapped in fiber optic cable that would create, quote unquote, electronic superhighways of communication and information, which he would, quote, call tentatively broadband communication network. That infrastructure is the subject of Mimi Anwoha's film, These Networks in Our Skin, from 2021. Here, the Nigerian-American artist considers the gaps, or as she calls them, the missing data sets between information processing and dispersal and the physical labor that goes into ensuring that very circulation. Referencing Igbo ritual, Anwoha depicts 4 women methodically weaving hair, spices, and herbs into the fiber optic cables that undergird the internet. These networks in our skin attempts to embody the system of seemingly immaterial digital information, asking questions about what information is transmitted, by whom, and which perspectives and people are left out of that network. Implicitly and explicitly, Anwoha shows us what is missing from a global conception of digital culture, knowledge production, and its material essence. Here, the artist rethinks the notion of quote-unquote women's work to imagine a layering of material and meaning into our information systems, which she characterizes as, quote, a silent insistence that a different kind of mythology entirely needs to govern the creation and maintenance of our techno-social systems, end quote. By reinscribing the materiality of the digital through the slow laying on of Black women's hands, Anwoha offers a deliberate deacceleration of information processing and dispersal, an insistence that non-Western, non-white people are more than mere data points populating the cloud. Opening 4, question the signal. Speaking with critic and collaborator Douglas Davis in 1973, Paik said, quote, the whole electronics industry has but one purpose to serve, reproduction of the original signal. They never questioned that signal. Electronics has thus been used for military purposes, for censorship, for eavesdropping, I want to make electronics more humanistic, more conscious of the problem of source materials, end quote. Just as Unwoha's film makes us more conscious of the source materials of the internet, Paik and Judd Yalkett's videographic study number 3 from 1967 breaks up the flow of television transmission to interrogate the medium's putative use as a vessel for passive information reception. Here, Paik manipulates videotape recordings of press conferences by President Lyndon Johnson and New York City Mayor John Lindsay by glitching the visual field with an electrified wire that disrupts the magnetic filings of the reel-to-reel mechanism. The work offers another possible pathway, one that demands less unreflective reception and recirculation of media in favor of direct intervention into that same media. In other words, this is a work that reminds us of the importance of not taking the media and political figures at their word and of the power of them having take you at yours. Anna Catherine and Deja T, known as Operator, find another way to question the signal in their piece, I'd Rather Be in Dark Silence Than, from 2020. The centerpiece of their elaborate installation is a signal-blocking trench coat created with the Museum of Contemporary Digital Art and fashion designer Barbara Sanchez-Kane. Constructed with military-grade fabric, the coat makes the wearer functionally invisible, unidentifiable, and untraceable. I'd Rather Be in Dark Silence Than addresses digital life under total surveillance and is an effort to quite literally fabricate a zone of autonomy for the wearer, a material impediment to the wireless panopticon. We know that real-life invisibility cloaks are just on the military horizon, thanks to adversarial patterns, metamaterials, and nanolenses. Operator nevertheless provides camouflage intended not for combat or for spying, but rather for disappearing completely, a reassertion of the self as something other than a target for extractive technologies and algorithmic exploitation. Trench coats were designed to keep British officers warm and dry in World War I. An operator is slang for members of special operations forces. So one can imagine Catherine T's work as a holistic act of détournement from military force to counter-hegemonic resistance. Operator's high-end trench coat is redolent of luxury goods and points to a future wherein the only untrackables will be those living without resources, and thus without a digital footprint, or those able to afford access to material methods of circumvention. Furthermore, the installation points out that the trench coat offers only a brief respite from user agreements and consumerist hailing before the wearer is thrust back into the field of social media via an augmented reality Instagram filter that blurs the faces of users even as it places them back on the social media platform. I'd Rather Be in Dark Silence Than conjoins our desire to disappear with our desire to participate, providing a reminder of the difficulty of disconnecting entirely and the effort required to participate in digital sociality on one's own terms. Opening 5, Oneness. Reflecting on his experiments in international satellite broadcasting, Paik wrote, "Oneness constitutes the very motor of human history. Important things happen only once in our lives, and they are neither repeatable nor reversible. Through live video art, we are finally able to deal very concretely with the central problems of human existence: chance, hazard, bet, ventured. Pascal and Sartre would be very jealous of video artists," end quote. An idea enacted through his trio of satellite works, which we just heard about from Professor Rhee, Paik pursued a simultaneous electronic affinity that could be shared by millions watching on individual screens in individual homes, or as he called it, in sync. Live video art, like the original broadcasts of these pieces, cannot necessarily be marketed, editioned, sold, or distributed past their initial airings. With the satellite works, Paik brought performative Fluxus sensibilities to the mechanical reproduction of video, embracing mistakes, glitch, an awareness of an event being made right before your eyes, and a heightened sense of both risk and reward. This sense of exploration and adventure, intertwined with an investment in oneness, animates recent developments in live projection performance. Utilizing laser projectors, projection mapping, mesh wireframes, and audiovisual mixing software programs, a new generation of visual artists are providing collective joy and release to concertgoers worldwide in immersive performances that can only be fully experienced in the time and in the place of their happening. VJ Liam Tomaszewski's groundbreaking mixed reality holo collaborations with DJ Eric Prides, for example, work to establish a new kind of communal and somatic intellectual practice. These complex illusionistic displays, which have their roots in the 18th century phantasmagoria and techniques such as Pepper's Ghost, in which mirrors or reflective surfaces are used in order to produce images of people or things seemingly out of thin air, are also impacting the development of today's AI audiovisual systems. The colossal scale and three-dimensional effects of these visual displays cannot adequately be captured by camera phone-waving fans, regardless of their intention to preserve these memories or even to chase clout on social media. Nevertheless, these shaky partial views may end up as the only enduring documentation of their existence, or the only public access of the works for the foreseeable future. There is no museum of concert visuals or official distribution of recorded presentations that can be accessed after the house lights come back on. Pride's displays weigh more than 5 tons altogether. Again, significant infrastructure is required to support these images that are without gravity, and involve multiple layers of flexible mesh LED screens to create realistic image positioning and transparency. Tomaszewski uses a variety of software packages, including Avalite's AI, Maya, Houdini, Cinema 4D, Adobe After Effects, as well as, he claims, quote, hundreds of plugins and different tools, end quote, in order to summon these stunning visuals. In performance, he maintains real-time control of these animations, dialing in parameters of color, intensity, and speed on the fly in order to match Pride's beats and crescendos. Many of Tomaszewski's images and motifs center on human-machine relationships, and the concerts are propelled by dramatic pendulum swings from the microscopic to the cosmic. For one stunning effect, Tomaszewski recorded and then animated images of his own eyeball into a steroidal Vertovian Kino eye run amok, the man-machine that sees all and does not require a controlling body or even a nervous system. These conditions and environments under which new forms of audiovisual practices are developed, received, and celebrated brings to mind the various ways in which Paik was interested in the places where art happened and in reaching audiences that weren't necessarily served by the art world. This meant that in addition to his work on public television, Paik provided video art across dozens of monitors in 1983, for example, for City Island, a fashion show by Black gay fashion designer Willie Smith, took part in video screenings in New York City nightlife venues like the Mud Club and Danceteria, and created his now lost video wall wing from 1990 for the Miami International Airport. Paik's embrace of oneness, picked up now by VJs like Tomaszewski and other live projection practitioners, taking with the moving images increasing affordances as a performance medium, allows us to shift our attention to an examination of publics and sites where art making takes place. Doing so confirms how communities, and not just visionary individuals, have long been central to art-making practice, and how innovative art-making has long been enjoyed in spaces outside of traditional art institutions. Treating those sites as subject for scholarship additionally affirms how media artifacts are only as important as the energies, ideas, and context that surround them. In my own work, I attempt to recover these artifacts and, inspired by Paik, to do more, to identify the specific social conditions that gave rise to their making, and to articulate how those communities have helped shape contemporary artistic practice. In the end, this is how Paik changed the rules of the game, by breaking open black boxes in order to rethink the normative uses of technology, and by changing users into makers. He and the artists I've discussed today rethink how art is made, how and by whom it is seen, and how its reach can extend the conventional boundaries set by markets and institutions, all in favor of making people seen and empowering to take media into their own hands. Thank you.